Welcome to the Thursday, April 4th, 2024 Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. First thing we need to do is have a roll call.
Bruce Forster,
Here.
Craig Burrow,
Here.
Mike Pratt,
Here.
Rex Meyer,
Present.
Luke Phelan.
Here.
Okay, the second thing that we need to do is we need to have a motion to adjourn pursuant to the county board's vote on petition number 23-P-1617 by Stewart Creek Solar LLC special use permit.
I make that motion.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to close that old meeting. Any comments? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The first order of business tonight is under old business, and it's actually petition number 24-P-1622, David Dewey and Lisa Dewey. And they are, we forwarded this meeting to tonight from before, and they would like to have it rescheduled again for our regular meeting next month.
If I may, Mr. and Mrs. Dewey have retained counsel, and so based on that, they are requesting the continuance.
Okay,
My office has no objection.
so all we're doing is rescheduling it to our next regular meeting. Can we have a motion to do that?
I move to continue it to our regular May meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. That regular meeting would be May 2nd at 7 p.m. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Next, we're going to move to new business, and we'll do it quickly. We would like to open a petition tonight, petition number 24-P-1622, Irish Eyes Farms LLC as owners of certain real property known as PIN number 16-01-13-000-001 and 16-01-14-200-003, located along south side of Pilgrim Road, approximately 0.15 of a mile off of Illinois Route 26 and 1.72 miles west of Lowell Park Road in Palmyra Township. It is for a 5-megawatt commercial solar energy facility. They are here today, but with the business that we have coming back up with Pulse Solar, we would like to move forward. We have 3 dates set for testimony and findings of fact. Those 3 dates that have been proposed are April 17th, April 24th, and May 1st. So with that, can we have a motion to move that one forward to those 3 dates?
I shall move.
Craig made a motion. Do we-
Second.
Mr. Chairman, you want to confirm what the time will be so it's clear in the record?
What's that?
Time that night?
7 p.m.
You-
Do we have a second?
Second. Yeah.
We have a second. Any questions?
I want to make sure they heard that, so.
What's that?
I wanted to make sure they got the time down since tonight started at 6.
Okay. 4/17, 4/24, and 5/1 at 7 p.m. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. This one moves forward to the 17th. With that, we're going back to old business and Pulse Solar, and I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are back for the continuation of the public hearing in petition 24P1621 Pulse Solar 2 LLC. When we recessed from last night, we were still in the petitioner's case. This evening, it is 6:10 PM. This matter is on the record. We have folks online. Are they able to hear us? All right, so the folks online are able to hear us. The downstairs in the court facility still has a setup for those that cannot make it up the stairs if need be. And I will turn it now back over to the petitioner to call any additional witnesses.
Thank you. I'd like to call Michael Maroos as our next witness.
The record will reflect that Mr. Maroos is online, Mr. Maroos, are you able to hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, we can see you. It'd be important that when you testify to speak clearly, since we are, I guess, broadcasting your voice in our courtroom. And I will now turn over to the chairman to swear the witness in.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
Michael S. Maroos, M-A-R-O-U-S.
And what is your current occupation?
I am president of Maroos and Company, and I serve as a real estate appraiser and real estate consultant.
And Mr. Maroos, tell us a little bit about your educational history.
I attended and graduated from University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana in the School of Finance with a specialization in urban land economics, which was their school of real estate. I immediately became employed as an appraiser and started taking appraisal classes upon graduation and received the SRA designation in 1979, which is the residential designation, the MAI designation in 1980. To do that, I had to pass 8 one-week classes, a comprehensive 2-day comprehensive exam, and pass several demonstration reports. And I've kept up my continuing ed subsequent to that, and I was invited in the membership of the Counselors of Real Estate in 1999.
Are you licensed here in the state of Illinois?
I am. I hold the highest form, Illinois General Certified, and I hold that same licensure, I believe, 6 other states.
Are you familiar with the Lee County area?
I am.
How so?
I have done agricultural appraisal work. In the past year, appraised the Lost Nations golf course for the second time and really kind of looked at the excess land component of that. And then I've looked at, I think, the South Dixon solar farm, which I prepared a report for. And then I've done numerous other projects in and around the area.
And are you familiar with an entity known as Pulse Solar 2 LLC?
I am.
Okay, and how so?
They engaged me to review their proposed solar farm for 5 megawatts in Lee County, just west of Dixon, and to analyze the report, to do research, inspect the property, and provide conclusions in a PowerPoint report.
And do you have that PowerPoint report with you? Are you able to share your screen?
I have the report with me. And you know what? Give me a second, please.
Kennedy, is this petitioner's exhibit number 6 that was previously admitted?
It is.
So if you can refer, when you refer to his PowerPoint, refer to that exhibit so we're clear on the record, it's not 2 separate documents.
You bet.
Yeah. Sorry for the slowness of this.
Mr. Marusz, can you see that on your screen that we have put up on the screen here in the court facility? Oh, that's his screen? Okay.
I can see, am I controlling the screen?
Yes.
Okay, then it's up.
And for the record's sake, I will note what's pulled up on the screen, as noted by the facilitator, is Petitioner's Exhibit 6, which was already admitted. Mr. Marusz, will you take us through your PowerPoint presentation briefly?
Sure, the first page just kind of summarizes my experience, and I have the MAI and CRE designation plus general certified by the state. I've appraised probably over $20 billion of real estate in my career. Besides private clients, I have over 40 public body clients that I do work for, primarily in the state of Illinois. I have also done significant number of market studies for all types of properties, including landfills, waste transfer facilities, new commercial, new industrial, religious facilities, and also probably over 50 solar projects throughout the Midwest and over 50 wind farms throughout the Midwest. The second page you're seeing are just some representative, the number throughout Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio. The next page just summarizes my conclusions before I go into them. Based on everything that I'm going to testify, and I analyzed in my experience, and based on the proposed projects with the setbacks as proposed, it is my opinion that there will be no negative impact on real estate values due to the project. The next page just basically are the conclusions. There are significant financial benefits to the local economy and local taxing bodies. Some of this you've already heard before. An analysis of recent residential sales proximate to existing solar farms. Note, there's not a solar farm here now, and the comparables provided later were not proximate to a solar farm. They're just properties generally to the west of the subject. But in looking at over 150 matched pairs of properties similar, are proximate to panels to those that are in similar areas, did not indicate any negative impact on value. An analysis of agricultural property values indicated actually there were an increase in value due to the development of a solar farm. And that's also based on reports from Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Iowa, where they actually studied that product. I'm going to get into this later, but I've surveyed and actually personally met with over 150 assessors in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, to determine if they've experienced any negative impact, if they've had any successful tax appeals, if they're valuing property proximate to solar panels any less than similar properties in their area. And that answer is none. No successful tax appeals, and they all have found, based on transactional data, that there's been no negative impact. And then, finally, that the proposed use will not be detrimental to the general welfare of the residents, nor will the project substantially diminish or impair the value of other properties or improvements in the vicinity of the solar farm. Sorry to go so fast. So when we do an analysis for a value impact study, we look at appearance, aesthetics, environment, sustainability. I've got one right now that's next to a drag strip, another one next to a landfill, another one next to a power plant. And obviously, those are uses that could have a negative impact. Noise and odor, obviously, heavy manufacturing, a coal plant, smell, a hog containment facility, traffic, heavy major industrial building with major truck traffic, and also with heavy employment with a lot of vehicular traffic, hazardous materials if you're by a landfill, public services, how's the impact? Is there stress on the schools? Is there stress on the roads? Is there stress on public safety? The fact of the matter is, once it's developed, it's a pretty benign, very quiet use that doesn't, add to the school. It doesn't really require any public safety requirements, and the additional money of the taxes add to the infrastructure of the community. When analyzing in a full report, we look at a matched pair analysis. And again, this is like I described before, looking for sales of properties proximate to solar arrays to those in a similar area with similar size, similar age, similar amenities, similar schools, to determine if there's been any negative impact. And long and short of it, over 150 of these matched pair transactions, we have not found any negative impact on value. This chart, I compliment the participants last night, and when I got called kind of early in the evening to be prepared to testify, I looked at this and I realized that sales 7, 8, 9, and 10 had actually, through a software glitch, transposed the same sale prices as 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I believe there's going to be a correctional page added, which, interesting to note, if you go over for the sale price per square foot of building area, that number was correct. I don't know what happened. I apologize, but I made an error. And the people that caught it, I should have caught it, and I do apologize for that. But basically, all these are doing is showing sales of properties basically to the subdivision to the west, which is a desirable, modern, functional facility of individual residential houses. Many of the price points are well over $400,000. It's some of the highest price points for residential property in the Dixon area. And all this chart was doing is just kind of showing the activity in the market area to the west of the subject, in a rural area, basically surrounded by agricultural uses. This next page was what you saw last night, which was the incorrect page, and the previous page was the corrected page. Again, I apologize. These next few pages are just basically pictures of these comps and just provide for your information. And then the next page is just kind of showing the transactional data, and the subject is in red, and it just shows obviously the aerial overview with the most recent comparables. The assessor analysis is what I discussed previously, but basically I call each assessor that has active and solar that's been operating for over a year in their township or county to see what they've been doing, what their impacts, what their observations, have there been any tax appeals, have they been successful tax appeals, and are they valuing the properties any differently? The answer is no, 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 that they found no indication. They found people that were concerned, that didn't like the change, that were negative, but when it came out to transactional data and the market, there was no indication that there was a negative impact on the values. Literature review, and this was touched on a little bit, I heard last night. There's 3 what I call peer-reviewed studies out. The first one came out University of Texas at Austin, and basically they did a nationwide search looking to see if there was negative impact on property values. What they found when they researched and they met with brokers and assessors in markets that had no solar, they were negative. And then when they interviewed assessors and brokers that had actual solar experience and sales transactions, they found no negative impact. So that's consistent with my findings. The Rhode Island study was brought up last night. And yes, Rhode Island is basically a big suburb, if any of you have been out there, and fairly high value and fairly dense development. And this study was basically focused on the more dense development. But in the study, if you go to that second paragraph, that it was focused on a density of over 850 persons per square mile. But it states that no impact was studied for rural impact, similar to the subject, because they found no impact. And the subject density in a square mile around the proposed solar farm is 140 persons per square mile, which is about 20% of the minimum here. So again, the Rhode Island study actually supports my conclusion. The last study, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, which I think it was mentioned not by name last night, but due to some of the percentage issues. So I read the article, I attended the webinar and listened to the comments in the webinar. And then through another relationship, I was able to have a 1-hour meeting with Ben Hone, who's the major author of the article. And basically what they did is a data done throughout the US. Unfortunately, they threw in sales of apartments, of commercial buildings, of condominiums, of garage condominiums. They didn't make any adjustments for schools, for paved roads, for modernization. So based on that raw data of 6 states, they found 3 that showed some negative impact. One was Minnesota. And Minnesota at the same time, I was doing 2 major solar projects of utility scale. And I talked to every single assessor in the state who similar type questions and that I previously discussed. None of them had found any complaints. None of them had any indication of negative impact. In fact, they were indicating positive impact. The kind of poster child is called North Star Solar, which is northwest of Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's a 100-megawatt facility that surrounds about 5 to 10 acre farmette houses. And the assessor there was in the Chicago County, it's called, was very concerned about impact. This North Star Solar opened up in 2017. And since then, actually property values have increased. And he's found no negative impact. There's been additional solar developed in his county, and it's all been positive. So for those facts, I find no conflict with the Lawrence Berkeley National Study. The last page is just for major solar farm development over 100 megawatts in Wisconsin that goes before basically a state public utilities. It's called the Public Service Commission. It's basically a judge, and they have anywhere from half-day to 3-day hearings. They hear the evidence, they cross-examine the witnesses, and all these are approved findings that they've made in the last several years. And they've all found there's been no negative impact on from the proposed development. Every one of these, I submitted a report, I testified and was cross-examined, and they basically affirmed my conclusion. So in my conclusion, I understand people don't like change. I don't like change. I get it. But mine is to really look at impact of value and look at the use and look at the impact of the use on the area, including the economics. And based on all of this in my experience, I find no negative impact to real estate, particularly based on the setbacks, where I didn't touch on that. But, you know, the state setback requirements, 150 feet from a house to a solar array. In my opinion, I think 200 feet is kind of the national benchmark that's safe, that's enough separation. And in looking at the subject subdivision immediately to the west, the closest house to the south is 290 feet. The next one in the middle is 522. The one to the north is 352 feet. So they all significantly, almost by a multiple, the state 150, and by what I consider to be safe, 200 exceed that setback. Sorry to go so fast, but I just wanted to get it in. Thank you, and I'm here for any questions.
Mr. Maroos, are you able to pull up the document that I've labeled Petitioners Exhibit 7 for identification purposes?
Um, Hopefully now. Did it come up?
I don't believe it has. Jonathan, is there any way that we could pull it up on our screen? Thank you. Mr. Maroos, can you see the document pulled up on the screen now?
Yes,
Okay, and it's labeled Petitioners Exhibit 7 for identification purposes. Do you see that?
yes,
Are you familiar with this?
yes, this is the corrected exhibit in my report where the sale prices of 7, 8, 9, and 10 were basically repeated 3, 4, 5, and 6, even though 7, 8, 9, and 10, the price per foot on the far right side was correct. But this is the corrected version.
And did you prepare this?
I did.
And then the second page to this exhibit, can you tell us what that is?
Yes. After I started getting ready last night, I looked and I saw a couple potential problems, and then I listened to the testimony. And then last night I looked through and found out that 7, 8, 9, and 10, the sale price was wrong. The unit prices were okay. Tried to figure out what happened, found a software glitch that repeated 3 through 6. So this is what was originally submitted, and what I highlighted in yellow under sale price was what was shown in the original submitted document, and those are incorrect.
And despite having, lines 7, 8, 9, and 10 incorrect on your original PowerPoint presentation, did that alter or change your findings or conclusions at all?
No, and this page was really provided in the original report for informational purposes, just looking at transactions in the subject market.
At this time, I'd like to move for entry of Petitioners Exhibit 7 into evidence.
All right, do any member of the zoning board have an objection to admission of petitioner and consideration of petitioner's exhibit number 7?
No.
Does any interested party have an objection they wish to make to exhibit number 7? All right, if you'd come to the podium and state your objection.
I have a question as
Nope.
to,
Nope. At
Oh.
this point, you're invited to ask questions when the witness is done. Right now, we're talking about the exhibit. If you object to the exhibit, state your objection.
I'm just asking if we are able to object to the exhibit at all.
Yes, you can
Yes?
object to but you need to state your objection as to why.
Okay. My objection to the exhibit has to do with it not being brought up when it was first discovered, because if I heard Mr. Maroos correctly, he just said that he saw it prior to it being submitted. Is that accurate?
I don't know when it was submitted. I caught it last night about 8 o'clock.
Okay, right about the same time then. I'm questioning why you didn't bring it up last night. That's all.
All
Because
right.
I
Well,
didn't.
That's my objection to
Mr.
it.
Marush, that's all right, hold on. So that's your objection to the exhibit, all right? Any further objections? All right, please go to the podium and state your objection. You probably have to hit the green.
Did you have ample time to review all documents?
No, again, at this point, we're talking about the exhibit and your objection to the
That's
exhibit.
what,
There'll be a chance later to ask the witness questions.
okay.
Right now, it's do you object to this exhibit being made part of the record and considered?
Absolutely, I do.
All right, state your reason why.
The reason why is he had ample time to review, which we did not, and that he provided false information
All right,
to,
other objections? I'm gathering all the objections and I will make a ruling, but
Can-
please.
Can we get names for the record, please, of the objectors?
Sean Foster.
Thank you. I think it was, first was Dr. Willie. Further objections? Please scan to the podium. Again, these are objections, not questions of the witness.
My name is Wendy Willett. Line item 6 is still incorrect. I have the property information pulled up on my phone from the Lee County website. That PIN says that it sold for $157,000 on 6/22 of, I'm sorry, I scrolled past it. 6/22 of 2020. That's 1834 Wolverine Road. The other objection I have to this is our questions and property values are more concerning our neighborhood, not the map of this that goes out about 2.5 miles to properties that are nowhere near our little subdivision that is going to be affected by this. And that is my concern because I don't believe the property is even evaluated on this list, except the one at 1805 White Pines Drive, or anywhere near our subdivision. So that is why I object.
Right, further objections?
Hmm?
I'm sorry, thank you. Further objections? Dr. Johnson?
Dr. Johnson, my only objection is that none of the houses that are going to be directly beside this solar field have been listed on this document. So it doesn't seem relevant for what we're discussing.
All right, having no further objections, I'm going to allow admission of exhibit number 7. The questions that have been raised as part of your objections are certainly appropriate questions you may ask the witness at the relevant time why this list of houses was considered. That would be a relevant question for the witness. But the witness did testify as to the creation of the document, the data he used to create it, that it's a true and accurate copy, so the standard for admissibility has been met. So it'll be admitted over objection.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Does any member of the zoning board have a question of the witness?
Can I ask you about your literature review, the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory Study, 2023? Is it correct that their conclusion was there was a 1.5% reduction in the value of the homes?
That was their conclusion, yes.
But your conclusion is that was too small of a reduction to be significant?
That was my conclusion, and it also was based on further investigation of the data that they used and how they analyzed the data.
What would you call a significant reduction?
Generally 3 to 5% or greater.
No further question.
Further questions from the members of the zoning board? Okay, at this time, interested parties may ask questions of the witness. I would remind those present that these are questions. Please ask them clearly of the witness. Asking questions is not an opportunity to argue or debate the witness. It's simply asking a question and asking the witness to answer it. So if you wish to ask the witness a question, please step to the podium.
I appreciate the amount of work that goes into preparing a document like this. As a school superintendent, I sat on that side of the podium a lot and dealt with a lot of these types of challenges. Excuse me. My question, a couple of them came up as you were talking. You talked about your numerous commercial projects experience, have you also done small residential property valuations? Or is it, your licensing, I realize, is based on continuing education. However, I also know that practice as well as knowledge is a key. And I'm curious to know how much residential property you have valued outside of a project.
So the answer is because we have done so many impact studies for so many different type properties that the basis is residential property. So quite a few. We do not do active mortgage work, but we also are involved in significant number of conflicted situations, particularly marital dissolution, where we're involving residential property. So quite a few. So I probably appraised over, well over 1,000 residential properties, but it's not the main part of our business.
Thank you. The other question you kind of led to is, I don't see anywhere in the packet a comparison between prior to a solar farm going in and after a solar farm is in for the same property. So I'm curious as to how you can project without looking at the actual valuations from before and after of any properties. Maybe you did, but it certainly isn't in the report.
So that's not included, but I brought up as an example, the North Star Solar. When there's been, it's called sale resale of a property. And again, that's a project that opened up in 2017. And there's been several sales. Again, we're in a rural area, so there's not a lot of transactional activity, but there's been several sales that sold. Actually, a couple sold twice after the solar farm was open, but those are not in my report. I just testified to this.
Where is North Star Solar?
It's outside of St. Paul, Minneapolis.
Thank you. You also talked about meeting with 150 assessors. Are there records of that meeting that we can see, or are we relying solely on your reporting?
No, I can provide documentation of the name, phone number, the county or the township of those assessors if that's requested. It's not in this report, and it's quite voluminous, but yes, that can be done.
I would appreciate having that at some point, simply because the missing these valuations so critically in yesterday's report and then not bringing it up as you were placing the report into evidence as an exhibit concerns me. It creates a perception in my mind of a lack of attention to detail. So I would like that information.
I would make an objection only for the record's sake. I'm happy to provide that documentation to the zoning office to disseminate it, and we could post it on the website, but I don't want to see it hold up the hearing. It's not a requirement under the ordinance, so I would have an objection to lodge at that time.
All right, so Dr. Willie, the objection will be sustained. The rules don't permit me to compel the witness to provide documents, so I'm going to sustain the objection. I believe counsel is indicating that she will communicate with the zoning office and have that document provided, and then you can obtain it from the zoning office.
Is there any recourse if it doesn't happen?
Again, there are no rules that authorize me to compel the witness to provide it, so at this point, the answer is none.
No? Okay. Let's see, there was one more here. Oh, you mentioned matched pairs. Where were the matched pairs that you used for comparison?
They're throughout Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan. But I just prepared a PowerPoint. The matched pairs are probably 40 to 60 pages long. So that's not in the documents that was tendered. And just for the record, I didn't tender this document last night. It was tendered and I saw it right before I was asked to step ahead. And as soon as I saw it, I did, but I was not able to testify last night.
Okay. The matched pairs that you mentioned being all over those states, are those specific homes similar to what you have in the report for our subdivision?
There's specific homes matched to other specific homes that are comparable. No two homes are generally identical. So some are, values in the 100,000, some are in the 200,000, some are in the 300,000, but they're generally rural residential properties scattered throughout the Midwest.
Thank you. I'm aware of the challenges to create matched pairs because you can very seldom control all the variables you're looking at. But I was very curious as to where they were.
Thank you, Dr. Willie. Next interested party has a question. Dr. Johnson?
I was wondering if you are aware of the study you referenced talked about how the definition of rural is 850 inhabitants per square mile. Do you know how many inhabitants per square mile Dixon is when we talk about whether or not it fits this definition?
The 1 mile area around the subject property is 140.
Well, Dixon, Illinois is 2,519 inhabitants per square mile. So it's significantly larger than the statistic you presented. So I just wanted to make sure that I guess it's more of a rhetorical question. I apologize, Tim, if that wasn't appropriate, but I want it to be known that I don't think those two ends are comparable.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Further questions?
Mr. Roos, have you
Yeah.
ever sold a residential home here in Dixon?
No,
Have you met with any family member other than clients here in Dixon?
family member, I don't understand what you mean.
Well, I'm trying to figure out like how you're coming up that saying that there's going to be no negative impacts on our community and our subdivision and on our homes, which even you say no negative impacts, but as it was already pointed out, and you constantly said there's no negative impacts, but it was already pointed out there in one of your studies that you presented here, there was, and also there's another one at 1.7% reduction. To me, my home being devalued, 2% is pretty big. And I don't think that should just be thrown out. That's financially responsible for me to understand that impact has consequences for us, not to mention everybody else in our neighborhood.
I'm going to object. I don't think there was a question.
Yeah, so I
Okay,
think,
okay.
I think he's getting to a question, but if you
Yep.
could maybe expedite to the question
Yes.
instead of the discussion, that would be appreciated.
Okay. Yeah. So, the question is, have you done any local investigation? Have you worked with any local real estate agents other than Heartland?
Well, I worked with ownership of Lost Nations that has significant real estate investment, but that is it. I don't contact, when I'm doing a study in a specific area, I don't contact and interview brokers, because if they say something negative and I repeat it, that could have a serious negative impact on their business with people that have emotions, and whether it be Facebook or Instagram or however, blog, and basically attack somebody whose livelihood is selling homes. And if they have no experience with solar, it's really not relevant anyway.
So again, have you worked with any local real estate agents within the Dixon area
No,
besides Heartland?
no.
So how can you assess that we're going to lose no value on our homes if you haven't even talked to any real estate agents whose job is to sell homes? We're not worried about a golf course. We're worried about our livelihoods and the money that we invested and set up for our families.
So again, let's go back. You had
So
a
my-
question in there. Let's stick to the questions. I think your question was asking him to explain how he could conduct the appraisal that he provided. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's the question, Mr. Burris.
So the bottom line, in my experience of looking over 50 solar projects through the Midwest and looking at the issues, including setback, the financial issues, what could be developed on the various property and what happens when a solar project is completed, and then looking at and interviewing the assessors, looking at the published studies, looking at the economic impacts, looking at the match pairs. Clearly, the evidence supports that, it's a relatively safe, non-intrusive use. But clearly some people don't like it. So like I said, I get it, but based on the facts, it's my strong opinion, based on my experience, that there'll be no negative impact.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Further questions?
Hello, Kim Stanley. I have one question. In the studies, do they state what the distance of the parameter is around the solar farm? I mean, we're within like a quarter of a mile. So do the studies that you're comparing, are they that close to the solar farms?
Generally, they start at 250 feet and then go farther out, generally to a mile. Clearly, again, if you're in Arizona and some of the areas where there's absolutely no vegetation and you got an elevation, you can see them farther. But where there's some elevation, generally as you get farther away, they're tough to see. But yes, that's part of the consideration. But again, these national studies are basically using a large amount of data and not really, there's a lot of adjustments that they're not making.
I just want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. If you're looking at a large parameter and how close those areas are versus like scattered farms or something like that.
They cover areas comparable and either and actually closer than yours. And again, there's so much data used because there are not perfect examples, but overall, it's a clear indication, again, in a rural area, similar to yours. And granted, there's high value houses in the immediate area. I took that into consideration, but also took in the setbacks and the population density, just to go on the record with the doctor in regard to the population density within 2 miles of the subject. It's 195 people per square mile.
Ms. Willett?
So I'd again like to bring to your attention the property valuation, not only related to the Lawrence Berkeley, but also to a study that was done by Michigan Public. And Michigan Public found in Minnesota, North Carolina, and New Jersey that they were finding significant property devaluation of 4 to 5.6%. So I'm not sure where this place was in Minnesota, other than you said outside of St. Paul. I don't know if that's considered suburban or actually rural like we are, because we're outside of Chicago, right? So, which could be different than Park Ridge where you're from. Also, I was reading the Lawrence says that closer than a quarter mile, they're seeing a 2.3% reduction. And considering that Lee County has increased my taxes considerably from when I moved there, that I had to go get it all reassessed. And in the last 4 years, they've increased at 12%. If my property keeps increasing according to the rate that the local assessor has on it, and you're telling me that the property evaluation, that the value will stay the same, does that mean that my taxes continue to increase even though the market value of my home does not?
I have no control over tax rates or whatever the assessor does. Clearly, if the market value increases and everything else stays the same, your taxes should increase, but that's impacted by factors that I cannot control.
Okay, so with your saying the 3% is like your number, and me finding 4 to 5% in some states, 2.3% on this Lawrence study, to me, I'm within this quarter mile circle, and many others within this room are, and several are definitely within the half mile. All of us are within the half mile at 1.5% decrease. I guess I have an issue with you're not thinking that there will be a devaluation based on,
So I'm going
study.
to interrupt you here. I want to give you the opportunity to ask a question, and there will be at the conclusion of the hearing an opportunity for a statement. But if you're going to ask the witness a question, please ask the witness a question. You can provide your statement later.
okay, I guess I'm done then, because I don't understand how he can say 3% is his number, but everybody else in the room thinks the devaluation that's coming up on all these studies puts us in there, why his not having anything to compare against in this area, why his is appropriate and our values are not.
Again, you are free to ask him a question about how he derived his opinion.
Okay, so how did you derive that it's not important to have any
No,
value loss?
Please restate your question. You're not going to argue with him to say, how did you derive your opinion?
Mr. Morose, how did you derive your opinion that a property devaluation was not significant if it did not meet your personal criteria of 3 to 5%?
Again, number one, there's positive economics. Number two, it's a use that doesn't provide odors, doesn't provide traffic, doesn't put a strain on the public facilities. Number three, the matched pairs don't support it. Number four, the assessor studies don't support it. Number five, the peer review articles based on my follow-up do not support it. I'm not familiar if the Michigan Public is a peer-reviewed article. I haven't seen that. I was only using peer-reviewed articles. So, and also, you know, my experience with, you know, appraising probably 12,000 properties in my career and doing, you know, work for both sides, public and private. Those are my opinions.
Is that down in the record so that we'll have that for later? Because that was a lot to take in 10
The court
seconds.
reporter is taking down the witnesses.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Rowe, how did you calculate, what population did you use to calculate your calculation that Dixon's population is? What did you say it was? How many inhabitants per square mile did you say it was?
What I said, and I'll repeat it, is I provided a population within 1 mile, putting 1 mile the subject of 140 persons per square mile. And then within 2 miles, 194, 195 people per square mile. I didn't include the entire town. I just took a circumference.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that that's why we had different numbers, because I was calculating Dixon as a community. So there's a big variance, obviously, if you're looking at just to clarify, you were just looking at our community within a square mile in comparison to the rest of the land around, because it's really just our neighborhood. Is that correct?
I'll explain again. I went a mile out from the project, and that was 140 persons per square mile. And then I want a 2 mile circumference from the property, which includes more than your neighborhood. And that was 195 people per square mile.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, any new, so I don't want people to keep coming back up and forth. If you have questions, get to them, finish them, and then we'll finish anyone that has interest in asking a question.
I just got one quick question. Is it possible that there are other errors in your study that you had ample time to go over?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Any additional interested parties that have questions? Anyone online that has a question?
I have one question.
All right, state your name and your question, please.
Dave Stanley.
Please proceed, Mr. Stanley.
Yeah, Mr. Maroos, is there any solar work that you've done or work for the solar in light of the property values that you found the EAVs to drop out of the 50 cases that you said you reviewed?
No.
Thank you.
Further questions from anyone online? Right, hearing none. Do you have any cross or redirect of your witness?
No.
All right, so the witness will be excused. Ms. Kennedy, do you have any further witnesses?
No, we would rest at this time.
All right, does the zoning officer have any additional witnesses?
None.
Any additional witnesses from the zoning board?
No.
Okay, at this point, what we're going to do is proceed to statements. Ms. Kennedy, it's your case. I'm going to give you the first opportunity to make a statement. Once you're done, I'm going to give any member of the zoning board that wants to speak an opportunity. Once they are done, then any interested party that wishes to make a statement will be given the opportunity to make a statement. And when all that is done, since you have the burden of proof, I will give you the last word.
Thank you.
So please proceed.
Thank you. As we noted yesterday at the beginning of this hearing, there are certain hearing factors that are listed out in the solar ordinance. And I noted in my opening that you are to use those as your guideposts. You're to look at the evidence and testimony presented throughout the course of this hearing and apply that to those factors. And so I'd like to briefly touch on each one of those factors and the evidence presented that speaks to each factor. So the first factor is the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the project will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. Here, we had testimony from the developer that the project's not going to generate any odor. There will be noise during the construction phase, however, that will be temporary in nature. There's a noise study included in the application materials submitted as an exhibit that concludes that the noise standards during the operations phase of the project will be within the Illinois Pollution and Control Board standards. There is a glint and glare report submitted in the application materials that concludes that there will be no glint or glare associated with this project. The developer testified that the project is not anticipated to emit any shadow flicker. The developer also opined about the EMF radiation. The project will not have any vibrations. He also testified that, of course, during the construction of the project, there may be some vibrations through the pile driving of the installation of the project, but long-term during the operations phase, there is no vibrations to be expected. Mr. Morel, the developer, testified to the vegetative screening that's proposed for this project, how it exceeds the ordinance requirements, and how the company has taken those Palmyra Township concerns and readdressed or committed to that vegetative screening in an attempt to shield the neighbors from seeing the project itself. Mr. Morel further testified to the company's commitment to working with the local fire protection district to ensure safety and training, not only during the construction of the project, but also throughout the operations phase. You heard testimony and there's evidence submitted related to the environmental issues with this project, specifically noting the EcoCat consultation with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, which ultimately concluded that adverse effects are not likely for this project. Further, the IDNR issued 5 recommendations. We went through those at length and how the project will meet or meets or will follow or follows those recommendations. Further, you have in your possession the Illinois Planning and Consultation Tool with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. We went through those findings through Mr. Morel's testimony. You also have a State Historic Preservation Office clearance letter submitted as an exhibit as well, all demonstrating that this project does not pose a threat or a concern to the environment. The second factor is that the project will not be injurious to the uses and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, nor will it substantially diminish and impair property values of surrounding properties. It is my belief, and we believe that we put on sufficient evidence, that the project will not prevent others from continuing to use and enjoy their property. Here I would also cite to Mr. Maroos's testimony, the presentation included as an exhibit and his opinion that land values will not be negatively impacted. The third factor is the establishment of the project will not impede the normal and orderly development of the surrounding properties. Here, as Mr. Maroos testified, this is a passive use. It's a temporary use. Throughout the life of the project, the project will continue to operate, but at the conclusion of that project, it goes through the decommissioning phase, and that the project will be completely removed and the land will be restored to its current use. The fourth factor is adequate public utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or necessary facilities have been or will be provided. Here, Mr. Morel testified that an internal access road will be utilized to access the project itself. He also testified that traffic during construction may see a slight or minimal increase. However, overall traffic conditions should decrease. He further testified that the current drainage will be maintained and improved. The company has agreed to partner with Huddleston McBride to ensure that the drainage is maintained and improved throughout the life of the project. He also testified to the company's commitment to following the AMA, that Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement, to maintain the drainage, among other things. I'd also like to highlight under this factor, this project, if it gets cited, isn't going to require county services. And so in my opinion, it's the best kind of development in that it's not going to tax the public infrastructure. It doesn't require any new public roads to be built to it. Everything that the company is going to do is it's going to build its own internal access road, as testified to. It's not going to require water and septic services to be run out to it. The fifth factor is adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. And again, I won't belabor this point, but I've touched on the internal access road that'll be utilized. You also heard testimony from Mr. Morel that a temporary laydown yard will be utilized during the construction. It will be on site to prevent congestion on the public street leading into the project. The sixth factor is the project is not contrary to the objectives of the current comprehensive plan of Lee County. And so I'd like to touch on briefly a few of the goals that are included in the Lee County comprehensive plan. One of those goals is that the county desires to maintain the agricultural economy in the county by limiting non-agricultural development on prime farmland. Here, your ordinance and the Illinois County's code has established that the siting of solar is an acceptable agricultural use. It doesn't take this project, if cited, won't take land out of agricultural use, just row crop production. And here I'd like to highlight Mr. Morel's testimony about the company exploring the use of agrivoltaics with the project. I know he testified that they might be able to grow hay. They can utilize a machine to come in and cut the hay and bale it. I think that's also going to preserve the agricultural use of the project, even if it is under the solar array. This project also generates an alternate stream of income for the landowner. And again, hitting on that it's a temporary use and that the solar farm can be decommissioned and the land restored according to those AMA requirements to remain agricultural and prime farmland. Another goal of the comprehensive plan is to preserve the rural character and farming lifestyle of the county. Again, I'd like to highlight that this provides an alternate stream of revenue for the participating landowner to help keep farm families. It preserves their farming lifestyle. And again, the agrivoltaics testified to by Mr. Morel also preserve the character and farm use of the land itself. Another goal of the comprehensive plan is to maintain and enhance the quality of life in the county to help draw commercial and industrial development. Mr. Morel briefly testified to the benefits that this project will bring to the county through property taxes generated and some of the jobs created. I believe that also speaks to that goal. Now, these are just 3 goals that I pulled out of the comprehensive plan. That list is not exhaustive. The 7th factor is the project shall in all other respects conform to the applicable regulations of the ordinance. And here I would point to Mr. Morel's exhaustive testimony as we went through each one of those ordinance requirements and how the project meets or exceeds those requirements. And so looking at those factors alone, I hope that you would agree with us that the project meets and conforms to the ordinance and that you will ultimately recommend approval of this to the Lee County Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Any statement at this time from the members of the zoning board?
No.
Okay. Interested parties, you have a right to make a statement. When you do so, please go up to the podium I would remind you, as I said at the beginning of the public hearing last night, please be respectful, state your views, your opinions. You can certainly offer your perspective, be it good or bad on the project, but please be polite and respectful at all times. So whoever wants to go first may proceed.
Could we also have them state their name for the record before they
Yes,
begin?
that would be helpful again.
Thank you.
Yes, I simply forgot last time. I apologize. Sarah Willie, Dr. Sarah Willie. I guess I would like to say to begin with that I would challenge the connection to one of the goals of Lee County because the jobs created will be temporary. And if I understood it correctly, this site is going to be managed remotely. And I just want to reiterate my objection to the project and my desire to have it withdrawn. I would like members of the zoning board to consider and possibly do a little research on the company itself. I was very surprised to find there was very little information. I couldn't find a financial statement. I found one estimate of net worth that makes me question the long-term viability of the company. And I wondered when it was founded. I couldn't find any of that information. So I would encourage you to do your own research. I also wondered if either of the companies, Morose or Ironwood, were publicly traded. I couldn't find any information as to whether they were privately or publicly held. And I wanted to say I appreciate your clearing up the exhibit because there was some confusion today among our group about whether or not the Morose report was entered as an exhibit. And I think I just want to comment on the way the process works, which I realize is probably nothing to do with you. It's set in the law. And my issue is probably more with the law than anything else because it took so much power away from the counties. But it happened so fast that I don't know if anybody here would have understood the need to object last night, because we hadn't even seen the report. So to me, that's a detriment to public participation. And do we now have a right, and this is more of a procedural question, to enter a letter of objection to the submission of that report last night?
If you have a letter you wish to submit to the members of the zoning board, it would be included as part of the record, yes.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
If it's simply a letter of comment, it's not an evidentiary exhibit, but it would
Right.
be included as part of the record.
Okay. So in conclusion, I still would like to go back to my request, given that the House has passed the bill to increase the setbacks. It's now going to the Senate, and I realize that's one hurdle. The other hurdle is getting the governor to sign it if it is approved, but that includes a setback of 500 feet. And I would ask that you consider adding that to any recommendation you may make to the county board, that the setback be increased to that amount, given the fact that there evidently is some legislative support for that because we are a year and a half away from the law being passed and they're already amending it. And that typically means they see the original law as in error and are trying to correct mistakes. So that's what I would ask. If you cannot see your way clear to object to a recommendation or not recommend it to the county board, that you at least consider increasing the setback when you make that recommendation. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Willie. Next statement or comment?
Dennis Boynton. So evidently we can put things into exhibits from our own or hand them to the county
If you
committee?
have a letter or statement to the
I've got
zoning board.
a statement of fact, I believe, that I would like to pass to them when I'm finished. That's okay?
You may submit your statement letter for the zoning board. Yes, it would be included as part of the record. It's not an exhibit, an evidentiary exhibit, simply your statement.
Okay. What it entails is in reference to last night, we kept hearing that there was no hazardous material on site. It didn't take me long at all. The first search I did on the internet came up that yes, lithium-ion batteries are hazardous material. They need to have placards on them when they're being transported, et cetera. This really disturbs me that the company installing this doesn't even know they have hazardous material available. So I'm wondering what else we're missing. They need to know it's hazardous so they can properly handle it and not cause issues with it. If they aren't aware of it, they can't take steps to do that. It just seems like they don't know things that they should know at this point. The other thing I tried to look through today, and I think anything that was entered last night as exhibits, I think is on the county website. I'm not sure how much this stuff needs to be on record, but I believe it should be. I could find nothing relating to a visual barrier, wooden or vegetative, either one, in any of the documents listed for this Pulse Solar on the Lee County website. They talked last night about doing a vegetative barrier that they changed along the west side. I didn't see anything about that. I have had past experience with subdivision being developed and things talked about at the zoning meeting. 3 years later, nobody knows anything about them. So I want to be sure everything is entered into public record so we can go back and look. It was supposed to be at that time, but there was multiple issues at that time that have not been done with that subdivision. So I want to be sure all these things are in the record so we know what's happening. So the barrier is one thing. The other thing we talked about yesterday, nobody seems to know who is responsible for the property right outside of the fence. The Ironwood representatives seem to think they didn't have to do anything with it, but there's somewhere between, I don't have those numbers right here. I did have them down. It's like up to 100, it's 99 to 150 feet, I believe, between the road right-of-way and the fence. Is that going to grow up to a pile of weeds? Whose responsibility is that? If you look at the lease contract with the landowner, it's not specified even what exactly Pulse Solar is leasing from him. It's open to discussion. So who's going to take care of that area? Just determine who's going to take care of those areas that nobody's dealing with or wants to address. It also talked about yesterday about bailing some of the cover inside the fenced area. Again, nothing on the website has changed. It's all pollinator habitat. That is very tough to bail. It doesn't get very large and bushy. It's pretty light material to try to bail. Last night it was also said, I asked that question specifically myself, that the noise tests were updated. They are not. The ones that I found today on the website are from February, and that was way before the Elmira Township meeting, but a lot of this stuff changed that, and we just have not seen the documentation of these things other than verbal, and I would like to see them documented. So I'm specifically going to ask the county board or the county zoning commission to consider 5 things as they look at this and just to have these things in order. Please specify what's happening outside of that fenced area so we know who's going to take care of it, at least who's responsible for it. Please detail what the visual barrier is. I think there's something maybe in the county ordinance about it, but let's get specific on what this zoning request is actually going to do. Let's get it in writing, please. Let's get a correct vegetative plan. Like I say, that has changed again. There has been no update of the articles on the website. Just look closely at the company like it's been brought up. We found some errors. We have only had 24 hours basically to review any of this stuff. How can we even look at any of this stuff? We can't go out and get our own appraisers. I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but we have no choice. We don't have any chance to go out and even make a comparison to what's happened. Part of it is too, I'm just going to ask for a continuance on this to extend the time frame that we have to make comments. Most of this stuff has changed. I indicated last night what had been mailed to us as landowners had changed last night. That was the first I'd seen that. We just don't have time to respond. The meeting next week, it sounds like with this Irish Eyes, you're giving them 3 times to respond instead of 2. Maybe that's just the final meeting, I'm not sure, but just look into the company a little more and just see. It just seems like there's some things here that please be sure everything's in place, documented, so when it happens, if it does, it's as we think it is, not what they've just told us, but it doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next interested party?
Yes, my name is John Delgado. The question is for Mr. Morrell. How many of the batteries are going to be in the power container?
Mr. Delgado, at this point, these are statements, not questions.
Okay, well, the point that I was trying to make is that during the briefings and discussion yesterday, it was stated that there were no hazardous materials within the project. Looking on the internet, and I looked at several articles, multiple articles, and it's not just one, that the lithium ion is a hazardous material. I would anticipate that on that container that there's going to be a fire safety symbol that's going to indicate that there are hazardous materials within that container. Also, I looked at and saw that some of the panels, the solar panels, could be during an electrical storm or for whatever reason catch fire. So there should be fire safety symbols for the solar panel field. And I did not see that mentioned. The other thing that I looked at, when I looked at the plan or the array of the solar panels, should there be a potential fire out in the field where there's 20,000 panels, there's no fire lanes. They're all very close. So how is a fire engine going to get out there if they need to contend with the fire in any of the solar panels? Additional comment is that when I looked at the proposed plan that was submitted to Lee County, because of the fact that there is the potential for hazardous materials being in there, I didn't see any type of an attachment or an addendum for addressing hazardous materials. Who is going to dispose of the hazardous materials? I don't know if Dixon, the city of Dixon, or Lee County has a hazardous waste material capability, or whether that's going to be contracted out or the responsibility of Pulse Solar. When I look at the description of the type of solar panels, they're the N-type monocrystalline panels, which have a life cycle expectancy of 25 to 30 years. So during the potential lease period, which could go up to the 40 years, there's going to be a requirement to change probably 20,000 panels. What are we going to do with 20,000 panels? Whose responsibility is that going to be to dispose of those? When I look at the lithium batteries, the life cycle on the lithium ion batteries is 15 to 20 years. Again, since we don't know what the number of batteries are in the container, they have to be disposed of. Whose responsibility is that going to be? Does Lee County have a hazardous waste site to dispose of all of these batteries? So I really think that when we look at the plan, we should include some type of an addendum that's going to specifically address hazardous materials and who's going to assume the responsibility for the disposal of those materials. And then the last thing that I have to make a comment, and it's one of the other residents made the mention of it. I spent 49 years with the Army and the federal government, and I attained the level of a lieutenant colonel as a civilian. And one of the things that I found early in my career is that when you have laws and regulations, they provide somewhat as a guide to the people that are trying to implement them and use them. Now, one of the things that we realized quickly was that you can never take away from them, but you can make them more stringent. And the point that I'm trying to point out is that the state guideline for 150 feet on the offset, we cannot take it away from that. We can't make it 100 feet. We can't make it 50 feet, but we can make it 500 feet. And so I solicit for Lee County to consider making the offset distance between the residents and the solar panel field 500 feet. Now that's something that should be considered, and it's going to protect the interest, the safety, and the health of the residents within that area. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Next, thank you.
Hi, Sean Foster again. Just kind of want to share my family story and why we moved to this community with these great group of people. As I'm sharing this, I want you guys to kind of put yourself in our shoes when you guys go to make that decision. Rather than make the decision for here, please find it in your hearts to find alternate venues for this project. From 2018 to 2019, my wife and I took our life savings and set out to find the perfect place to raise our family. We searched pretty much every available inch of the Dixon community to try and find a perfect place to call home. I find it ironic that Matt Hermes was our agent at that time. He bought us to the property that we fell in love with. Upon our arrival at that perfect little subdivision, we saw open fields, beautiful sunsets, and children playing in the yards. It was an absolute no-brainer, and we instantly fell in love with everything this place had to offer. We put down everything we had in our accounts and planted our roots here and built our dream home. The community was perfect the way it is, and everything we dreamed of. Now we face adversity, loss of liberty, unknown health and environmental dangers, and a rather significant loss of property value. If Mr. Hermes would have bought us to a subdivision with a solar farm already in place, there is no way we would have settled, even if the financial costs would have been drastically lower. So I'm sorry, I'm not buying that there is no negative impact on property values, which also leads me to believe that there are other concerns that have not came to light yet. I'm all for clean energy and financial savings. Last year, I even put a solar project on my home. I could have pretty much been financially free from electric bills, except for delivery charges through ComEd. But but I opted to change the entire layout of the solar panels on my home so it wouldn't be visible to my neighbors, ruin the aesthetics of my dream home. So the solar company I was working with rearranged the panels so they would not be a visible eyesore and you cannot see them from the road. My system now does not produce enough and I still receive a bill. I do create some savings, but I'm willing to take that loss for my family and my neighbors' happiness. What I'm asking for is the same consideration. I made a mistake and entered into a 25-year contract with that solar company, Everbright, which is actually part of the Better Business Bureau. I'm not sure you guys are. The installation did not go as planned. It took 3 months longer than promised. Along the way, there were many headaches. Now I'm on the other side. And even with net metering, I'm not saving as much as promised. So again, empty promises. With current process in place, with current processes in place, I know many of your hands are tied right now. But I implore you to think of your fellow taxpayers and these stand-up citizens of Dixon, and please have our backs. I think there's a lot of pressure for solar, and I believe it to be very good for local economy and environment. I am also willing to accept seeing solar in a lot of different settings. I just think there are certain places that should be off limits, like our little slice of heaven. Thank you.
Thank you. Next interested party that wishes to make a statement?
I had a couple things I was going to give to the board that I didn't. Can I bring those
Yeah,
up?
well, I'll address that when we get through the statements. I think you had a statement you wanted to submit, and Dr. Willie had
Okay.
one as well.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll still address it at the end because we have another meeting yet. So please, ma'am, go ahead.
Dory Kingery, I just wanted to say to you that I have a rare genetic autoimmune disorder. It is in 1 in 2,000 people who have this autoimmune disorder. My husband and I used to live in the city of Dixon. And when it became apparent that they had the radium in the water, my body became so red that I was not able to sustain living in the city of Dixon with water filtration systems. So we made the decision that I would go out to my parents' home, which is one of the residents near there that you had on that description of home values. And so every day I would go out to their home and take my shower and get ready for the day. So then we found the place where we live now at White Pines Drive. And ironically, John and I are musicians and the address is 1812 White Pines Drive. And we both chuckled because it is Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. How ironic. Not many people know that about that. And so with that, I have been able to be in my own home with John and thankful that I am able to live my life. And because of my doctor in Hinsdale, I am able to be who I am without many side effects. But you say there are potentially no health issues. I want to tell you that I will be that canary that will go down the mine shaft, and I will tell you how it is. Because during COVID, I'm a school teacher, I'm a reading specialist at Jefferson School. And because of the spray that they used, that they said was natural, within 10 minutes, I instantly started to turn red, burned and itched, and I could not stand being around that spray. And so because of the kindness of the people that work in my building and the custodian who took care about my health issues. He did not spray my room any longer because I brought my own that I can handle. And he did not spray anywhere around where I worked until I left well after 6 o'clock at night. And he is still to this day, when we had that health breakout, he waited until I left because he always would come in and ask me, "When are you leaving tonight, Dory?" And I will wait to spray. This may not affect you, but it affects me and my family and my health. And I thank you for your time and listening. And I know it took a lot of preparation. I understand that because in my work, I understand how important it is to have facts and figures and data. But please understand that I have health issues and I don't want to be that canary. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next interested party? Going once, going twice? Dr. Johnson? I almost said going 3
I
times.
know, Tim, you know me well. As a physician, I'm a scientist. And so yesterday and today, we sat through a lot of Mr. Morell's testimony that's been submitted into evidence, studies and reports based on, I gathered from, I'm assuming, I should say people that support the solar project. And I think we need to emphasize it's not that we don't support solar. We just are asking for you to push it further back for all of these reasons. Years ago, case studies showed that cigarette smoking was okay. When we gather evidence to make a case for things like this, there's an obvious selection bias that we all need to be aware of in this room. And my neighbors, we've spoke of the limited time we've had to prepare evidence that could counter a lot that's been presented, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be able to. With the time crunch that we've been given, we've done the best that we can. But, again, this amazing community that cares about the environment, but truly cares about each other, we plead with you guys to just push the project further away from our backyards. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that's present in the courtroom that hasn't made a statement? Please proceed.
So my only final statement is I too would ask that we receive a good amount of time that we as a neighborhood can put together some solid paperwork for submitting, because we've had a very limited amount of time. We had less than 24 hours because we got out of here and got home around 9:30 last night. Many of us work. I don't work, but I was trying to coordinate with several of the neighbors what we could put together. So that's why I don't have a lot of information. I was trying to do a lot of research. I would emphasize that the document that Mr. Morose did present still had an error on it for a property value. I use the Lee County website for property searches. So I would ask that you give us time to look at this. And I could not find anything from Morose or Ironwood as being part of the Better Business Bureau. So I would reemphasize that looking into these companies, I don't know how somebody that resides in the city of Chicago can possibly compare us to a golf course at Lost Nation as a resident. That noise, I can sit there and tell you that heater right there is probably well within specs. And if that's the noise I'm going to hear every time I walk out my door, 12 to 16 hours a day, depending on the time of year when the sun is out, I find that to be intrusive. I don't care what the federal guidelines say. It is a very annoying noise that will supersede wildlife noises. I'm used to hearing tractors go down the road. I understand there's not, I'm also concerned about the pollinator field. I love the fact that it's a pollinator field, but I have asthma, and there was 2 summers ago when the fires were going on in Canada, I understood what somebody with severe COPD goes through. I could not believe that having just a little bit of asthma that occasionally acts up what it was like to not even be able to bend over and plant a flower. So I would ask that you give us time as a community to put some additional paperwork together so that we can get solid evidence or concerns put to the county for their planning commission to be able to review and submit to the county. I understand Governor Pritzker's laws. I understand he pushed it through, and I understand everything that they have. As I said last night, Mr. Morrell has done a very nice job on what he has presented. It's a stellar project. I just don't want it a tenth of a mile from my home. Mostly because of the noise and the pollinator field and wanting to be able to go outside and enjoy my yard. So that would be my final request, is that you give us that continuance so we can put some paperwork together for submitting.
All right, thank you for your statement. Anyone else that's present in the courtroom? All right, anyone online that wishes to make a statement?
Yes, I'd like to make a statement.
All right,
My
proceed,
name's
Mr. Stanley.
Yeah, I'd like to make a statement. When we first moved out to the subdivision, where we were one of the first houses built in the subdivision, we were presented covenants from the existing subdivision to our west. One of the things we couldn't do is we couldn't put fences up. They wanted to make sure that they kept the natural view site-wise. And today, we are a subdivision without fences. And now we're going to be subjected to, as I look out my window to the east, I look right past Brenda and Jerry's home, and I see farmland. If this project goes through, that view will be gone. It won't be farmland. And that view will not be pristine. It will not be something that somebody will be drawn to the natural setting. And that will hurt our property values. I can't understand how anybody can't understand that property is based solely on location, location, and location. It's also based on what proximity is around you. And so when this thing, if it does pass, and if it does get built, our property values will be hurt by this. And that's something that I just simply can't accept. I'm a retired teacher. My wife and I both are. And, you know, those are things that definitely will affect our pocketbooks. I just urge the board to reconsider this location. There's many other locations that don't have neighborhoods. I know this was chosen because of that electric line down the road. There's other places that are more suitable than around a neighborhood like ours. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Any others online that wish to make a statement? Opportunity been given. No one else online asking for a statement. Before we get to the petitioner's final comments, and they get the final word because they have the burden of proof. Mr. Boynton, you had something you wanted to provide for the record, if you would bring that up. And I'm going to have you give it to Ms. Hinkle. It'll be available in the zoning office for anyone that wants a copy. Dr. Willie, you had something you wanted to submit. If you would get it to Ms. Hinkle in the zoning office, she will make it part of the record as long as it's there before this board meets on the 10th. Okay? Ms. Kennedy, I'll turn it over to you for any final comment, statement on behalf of the petitioner.
Sure. Thank you. I've written down throughout the statements provided tonight, I've written down a few notes, so forgive me. I'm going to jump through those real quick and I might jump back and forth. But essentially what I'd like to just highlight and remind to the board is that you are bound to follow state law. You are bound to follow what the ordinance provides. And so I want to read to you an excerpt from the Illinois Counties Code that provides in relevant part, a request for siting approval or a special use permit for a commercial solar energy facility shall be approved if the request is in compliance with the standards and conditions imposed in this act, the zoning ordinance adopted consistent with this code, and the conditions imposed under state and federal statutes and regulations. You've heard statements made about the net worth and long-term viability of the company. I believe that the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement, the AMA, addresses this. It requires the company to post financial assurance in order to adequately protect the county. We're required by law to follow that. That's a binding agreement with the state of Illinois through the Department of Agriculture. It's a requirement of any special use permit granted under the zoning code. And notwithstanding that, the company has repeatedly committed to following those AMA requirements. There's been some statements about the setback of 500 feet. The county's code expressly prohibits against requiring or making a condition that a solar farm be set back farther than the setbacks provided in that act. And I'd like to read the relevant provision of that law. Notwithstanding any other provision of law or whether the county has formed a zoning commission and adopted formal zoning under section 5-12007, a county may establish standards for a commercial wind energy facility and commercial solar energy facilities or both. These standards may include all of the requirements specified in this section, but may not include requirements for commercial wind energy facilities or commercial solar energy facilities that are more restrictive than specified in this section. So I believe respectfully that you cannot set longer setbacks than what's provided in that act. We have to follow state law. We have to follow your ordinance. As to the statements about the vegetative screening concerns, the petitioner is obligated to follow the vegetative screening requirements in the ordinance. And in fact, we went through testimony with Mr. Morel that the company intends to do so. Moreover, we have submitted as petitioner's group Exhibit 5 a proposed vegetative screening plan, and we've committed on the record that the company is willing to be bound by that. That shows its commitment. That's a condition that you can impose on the company to ensure that adjacent property owners are protected with that screening. The petitioner is only able to obtain a special use permit for the leasehold area. We can't control what the landowner does with the remaining parts of his land. That's beyond the purview of this board. It's beyond the purview of any special use permit granted to the petitioner for the leasehold area. And then lastly, the concerns about the noise study that were iterated. Under Roman numeral 5 of your ordinance, section 12, it requires that the company shall demonstrate compliance with applicable noise requirements in its special use permit application, and we did so. There was a noise study prepared, submitted as an exhibit, that's petitioner's Exhibit 1, that demonstrates that all noise generated by the project will comply with those IPCB standards. The section in the ordinance also requires that the company provide proof of this compliance once built to the Lee County zoning administrator. So the company is going to have to follow the terms of the ordinance. I believe that we're going to be able to adequately address the noise concerns. Once the project is operational, we'll have to, commission a new noise study to address any noise concerns. So based on all of this, I would like to reiterate that the project is in compliance with the ordinance. The petitioner has submitted more than sufficient evidence of this, and that we ask that you approve or recommend approval of this petition to the Lee County Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. So for those of you present, the public hearing now concludes and closes. This board will meet on the 10th of April at 7 o'clock to begin in public discussing findings of fact based on the testimony and evidence that's been presented. During that meeting, it is open to the public. All of you are welcome to attend, but it is not a continuation of the public hearing. There will not be further witnesses. There will not be public, objections or statements in favor. Certainly, if there's relevant questions that need to be addressed process-wise, I'll see that those get addressed. But it is a meeting for the board to publicly discuss and make decisions on findings of fact as required by the Lee County Ordinance. The Lee County Ordinance lays out the determinative factors that this zoning board will have to go through. Those factors are driven by state law. And this board will be required to go through them and make determinations, which ultimately become part of a report. That report will then go, depending on the vote of the board, to the county board as a whole. Potentially, the earliest date would be what, Alice?
If we conclude on the 10th,
If
it
we
would
conclude
be
on the 10th.
April 18th at 6 o'clock.
Okay. And if it takes longer than the time on the 10th, then it will be the next county board meeting, correct?
And that would be, I believe it is May 23rd at 6 o'clock.
So we won't know that until next week on the 10th when this board begins its work on the findings and see how that goes. So-
Also, on the 10th, that'll be 7 p.m., not 6 p.m.
Correct. All right. Do any members of the zoning board have any questions? All right. Mr. Chairman, as the facilitator, I will turn it back over to you.
We need a motion to recess until next week on the 10th and 7 p.m.
Make a motion to recess till April 10th at 7 PM.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We are in recess. In school, that was fun.